Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about some hidden costs associated with moving. Now I'm going to break these down into the hidden costs you might anticipate if you are hiring full service movers versus doing a DIY move. So I'm going to start with full service movers. So if you are hiring any company to handle the start to finish part of your move, meaning they pack everything for you, and then they load everything for you and they unload it, you're going to see this type of interstate bill right here, right? This is your document that you're going to get. And with this document, you can expect to see, it's actually kind of hard to see here, but there are many different sections for your charges, namely the weight charges. So that's going to be based on the weight of all your personal goods. That's going to be a base rate and an additional rate if perhaps you have some form of additional fee as part of your agreement. So that might say, this is the base rate for up to X number of pounds, but if you go over that, then you're charged double or something. And then you have the cubic feet charges. So that might be an additional based on space. Underneath you have your hourly charges. So that's part one and part two. That's going to be the hourly charges for the work that the movers do, packing, loading, and then of course unloading and unpacking at the other end. Included in that are the packing materials and labor. So you're probably going to see a section. Now your bill is going to look different depending on which company you use, but in general, you can expect to see this breakdown. So to me, a hidden charge might be things like the weight charge if there's an additional service fee after a set number of pounds. And that usually happens if you get a quote for, let's say, a 3-bedroom house, and then they come through and they're like, oh no, you have like a ton of stuff. What do you mean you have a heavy desk and a big dining room table and a lot of books? That's way too much stuff for one person or 3 people or whatever. Then they might do that. So I don't like that. It's kind of sneaky. I'd look into that before you sign an agreement. Now, the packing materials and labor, that is something to consider. You will get an estimate that you sign before they start this deal. So you'll be able to see what that anticipated cost is going to be down here for packing and other materials. So things like boxes and moving blankets and what have you. Now, something to consider is if you plan on moving a lot, you can reuse a lot of those packing materials. So investing in them once is a pretty simple thing to do, and it means that you'll have things like moving blankets in the future versus these companies which purchase the same materials and then reuse them sometimes, and they spread that cost to all of the patrons that they have. Now, if you are doing that, you can use resources like Move Buddha to use this moving calculator over here. This is for the number of rooms you have, the number of boxes you might need. Let's say 5 people and we're a heavy packer with a 3-bedroom home. This is going to tell me roughly how much I'm going to need, and then it's going to give me a quick guide here. You can also use other resources to figure this out, and this is just for the boxes, of course. This isn't going to extend to the other moving supplies you might need. Now here, you might have other charges, other services, fuel surcharges here. Under special services here, a little hard to tell, but if you are moving a safe, especially a really big gun safe, that's going to come at a special service. That's going to be its own charge, hidden charge there. Hidden charge for stairs, for long carry. Let's say you have a driveway that is incredibly long. We had a very long, windy driveway. That meant that they couldn't get the truck down the driveway, but they still had to carry everything a really long distance. So that's going to be another hidden fee. If you have a piano, which I do, they're going to charge you extra for that. And hopefully they won't break it like they did. There are other special services that you might have to pay for, like a bulk item other than a piano. There could be an extra service fee for assembling or disassembling your furniture. There could be an extra service fee if you have a motorcycle that you are packing, or if you have contents that you need them to store for you temporarily. So these are the things that you can expect in terms of hidden costs for full service moving companies. Other hidden costs might be moving insurance. They might charge you moving insurance, and that's going to likely come from a third party. There are many different third-party movers you can see here, and you can choose to get that insurance or not, but you might have a cost based on the pounds of personal goods you are moving or just a flat rate deductible, and that's going to depend on the company you are using. Now, if you are moving yourself, I'd still recommend using this kind of moving calculator, but I'd start with over here. So let's say we are moving to North Carolina from Kansas. And a 3-bedroom house we're moving in the spring because no one wants to move when it's gross outside. So you can see here that this gives you a rough estimate of what your costs are going to be. And those costs are a rough estimate. So you see here that the professional quote from companies like Safeway is going to be around $3,700 upwards of $6,500. Now, it could be more depending on whether you have any of these special services here, whether you have that extra fuel surcharge, the insurance charge, the bulk item like a piano or a safe or stairs. If they have to walk up and down stairs, that might come at an additional surcharge. So you can choose freight shipping or container shipping as well, and you handle the move. And you pack everything, you load everything, they drive it to your new location. Meanwhile, you fly or drive to your new location and meet them there. You can see here that those costs are, in some cases, 1/3 to 1/2 of what a full service mover is. But that doesn't mean you won't experience issues there. So with companies like Upack, if that's what you're using, a hidden cost might come from not being able to park the container where you live. I did have that happen once. They just couldn't get it down the driveway. The driveway was short and very steep, and there wasn't enough room to maneuver. And there wasn't any room on the street because of our city limit restrictions. We couldn't park anything on the street at that time of year. So we had to drive to the shipping yard. I am incredibly grateful that they gave us that option. It made it possible to save literally like $20,000 on our move. But that meant that we had to drive to and from their shipping yard during the hours that they were open. So it wasn't like you could come home from work and be like, all right, let's get a full 6 hours of work in before dinner, because they closed at 5 or 6. So that is something to consider. That's going to be an extra cost if you do have to cover the cost of fuel driving to and from their shipping yard. Ours, for example, was about an hour and a half away from us. So that was a 3-hour round trip drive every day for several days. And they were nice enough to let us have an extra day or two, so we didn't have to try and shove everything into the 3-day limit, simply because of that change in plan. Now, if you are driving or flying, that's another hidden cost. No one ever calculates you might look at the flight, or if you're driving to your new location and meeting your pod there, you might look at the cost of your hotels, but calculate for gas driving your vehicle to that new location. And more importantly, calculate about $50 to $100 per day for extra spending. You don't think that you're going to spend that much, but then you stop to get gas and you pick up a snack or a coffee, and of course it's all overpriced, but you need that to keep you going. And then you stop again later for gas and you get lunch this time, but you're also going to buy a souvenir from that random little shop because, oh, how cute. So I promise you, budget for $50 of unexpected supplies and other things when you stop, and upwards of $100 if you're including your cost for meals. Now, there are ways that you can get discounts here. Of course, if you are using companies like U-Haul, you can actually, they give you discounts if you stay at certain motels. So moving, you might be able to save money on things like, I believe, Motel 6 and a few other companies. You will also need to consider the hidden costs of your supplies if you're moving yourself. So you might use something like this moving calculator, and that'll give you the boxes. But remember, boxes aren't the only thing. Now, a lot of people think, oh, it's fine, I'll use my clothing or my towels, and that'll wrap everything. And you're going to run out of clothing and towels fairly early on in the game. So you're going to need extra supplies. And you don't want to cut corners when it comes to boxes, when it comes to tape, or when it comes to bubble wrap, especially if you have anything that you value, because cheap boxes will collapse. They are not designed as sturdily as things like, I don't know if that's a word, we're going to go with that, as U-Haul, which has the much thicker board structure in each of their boxes. So they are designed to stack on top of one another and do so in a very nice way, such that you have optimized your space in your moving container or in your truck, versus if you try to cut corners by just, saving all the random delivery boxes you get. That's going to seem cool, but that cardboard isn't as durable and it's not uniform in its shape, so it just won't stack as well. You're also going to have to contend with cheap tape. That's just not going to work. It's not going to spread. It's not going to hold your boxes in place. Poor quality packing materials are going to be too thin and they're not going to protect your goods. So when something shifts or moves while driving, it might just crack all your plates, and you don't want that. Another hidden cost, whether you are using Upack or a third-party moving company, is going to be things like vet bills. So if you do have a pet, you will need to, whether you are flying or driving, get them checked out with an updated sheet from your veterinarian that's cleared them for travel. That is an absolute requirement if you are flying. If you're driving, it is technically a requirement, but no one has ever asked me for my vet information when I moved across state lines, although I had it handy just in case. So that is going to add to your unexpected costs. House cleaning. Oh, doesn't matter which type of moving service you use. You are going to have to clean your house if you're a nice person. And if you're renting, you're going to have to clean your house because it's probably a requirement. So you can find things like local labor through U-Haul, but you're not going to find cleaners here. You're going to have to find a maid service. And our house, the last move was about $600 for that deep clean moving out service. It was incredibly comprehensive, but that also came with the additional requirement of a special carpet cleaning service, but that was also part of the renter's agreement. So you may spend around $1,000 depending on how big the property is and how much you have to clean, and that is something based on where you are moving from and what your agreements are there. So unexpected costs can include the extra stops you make while driving, your vet bills if you have any, house cleaning, moving insurance, fuel surcharges, all the things that the moving company might charge you with, like supplies, stairs, moving a safe, moving a piano, or having a long driveway, things of that nature. So definitely start with a moving calculator like Move Buddha to help you figure out what your anticipated costs will be for each of these respective services, as well as the number of moving boxes you need. And then check your contract before you sign with any company as to what those costs could be.